This episode is brought to you by MPB. Get cash for the kit you're not using or trade it in for the gear you want at mpb.com. Hey folks, in this quick interview, I'm speaking with my friend Evgeny Tchebotarev. We're going to be talking about the world of limited edition prints and what that might look like in the future. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. I've got a little kind of a quick hit today that I wanted to share with you guys. I was in the middle of a conversation with my friend Evgeny, who is, by the way, founder or co-founder, I think it's founder or co-founder of 500px, 500pix.com, and an executive over at Skyloom and a bunch of other things. But he's doing some other cool things in the NFT space, and which makes him an authority now in NFT and what that might mean for the rest of the world as we go forward. But I had a very specific discussion I wanted to have with him about how NFTs relate to limited edition prints. You know, when you create a print and maybe you create 100 prints and you say, that's it, I'm destroying the negative and deleting the raw file. I'm going to sign and number each one, and each one is worth X $100,000, whatever, right? And then you let them off into the world. I'm assuming NFT is going to make some changes to that and how we approach that modality or that method of selling limited edition items, specifically photography, prints, and artwork. So Evgeny Tchebotarev is here to talk about that. He's got some ideas around how that might work. Ev, man, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, doing well. Yeah, and that's a really interesting topic that you're trying to dig deep into, because you're exactly right. The world is changing really fast, and NFTs are the cool new, let's call it a toy today, but it will become the standard that we all live by in 3 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, which is. You know, a whole different show. We could talk about just the world of crypto and NFT and how it's a roller coaster ride in terms of value, depending on the cryptocurrency you're looking at. And then now NFT is kind of in that boat and painted with the same volatile brush that cryptocurrency is painted with. So people, rightly so, I think, are like, yeah, I'm going to wait and see about that because I don't know what's going on there and I don't really want to understand it. So before we dive into the whole limited edition print thing, tell me about that, like just the world of NFTs and how it's painted with that crypto brush, the negative crypto brush of it's a scam, it's not real, I'm just going to leave it alone for now. What do you think about all that?
Well, look, every time there's a new technology, there's the same thing happening all over again. People asking, like, is it a real thing? Should I get on it? We had this with Snapchat, with Instagram, with internet. If you remember, there's all this news articles that says internet is a fad. And Here we are, we're running businesses, building businesses. They're all on the internet. And basically without internet, most of the businesses that I know or participate in, they wouldn't exist. So the same thing with crypto. We're in really early days. There is a small amount of people who own crypto. Globally, that's less than 1%. So we still have 99% to go. Most people have money, at least $1 or at least some local currency that they have on them. But very few people have crypto today. And NFT is basically like a subsection of this. So basically you need to have crypto and then you need to participate in the crypto markets and use that to either buy NFTs or mint your own NFTs or participate in other projects that crypto has brought to the world, like decentralized finance and others. And so that is a fraction of a fraction. So now we're talking about probably 0.05% of the world population that ever bought or sold or minted any NFT. So as you can imagine, we still have 99.95% to go, and this market will grow exponentially and will eventually take over all of the traditional art markets or photography markets.
Yeah, I see that. And that's which means if you're a photographer or creative, you can't afford to not pay attention to it. You cannot pay attention to it, and be a late adopter, but it's the early birds that are at least becoming educated about the NFT space. And you may not feel like you want to participate in it right now, or crypto or whatever, but at least understand the lay of the land and what the possibilities are. And that's what I wanted this conversation to be about, taking that one direction of, which is just one little part of NFT, right? And that's the whole smart contract piece. And so in that intro you heard, right, painting the stage of photographer or gallery owner or whomever that wants to create a body of work, a limited edition. Say it's me. Say I'm a photographer and I decide, you know what? I want to create a limited edition of 9 cinemagraphs that I want to release as NFTs. I want them to be original. I want them to have value, and I'm not going to create them anymore. So I want that level of exclusivity associated with them. In today's world, paint the picture of how that would happen in today's world, and then how it will happen. Let's go out on a limb and say NFT is a foregone conclusion, and say this is how it will happen in the next couple of years, being able to limit those editions. How would that work?
Right. Well, before I answer this, if you remember the internet about 20 years ago, most people would use pseudonyms. They would use fake names to run things around on the internet. And that felt normal, and using real names felt not normal. It felt like, why would you use your real name on the internet where everybody's a stranger? But eventually it became an issue of trust. So you trust people who have a verified checkmark. You trust people who have their real name, their reputation and identity attached to their online persona. Mm-hmm. And so thinking of the same thing, if you are making a print, a limited edition print, and selling in your local market, you're attaching your reputation. People know that you will not print another same limited edition of prints a week later to sell it to unsuspected audience, because then your trust is eroded and you will be shamed for doing so. What the blockchain and NFTs enable is that they bring all this trust in a trustless society. So basically, you can trust the mechanism because it's immutable. It's impossible to change. And so once you attach your reputation, your wallet, or your identity to the blockchain of minting, everybody anywhere in the world can see at any point in time what exactly have you done with those contracts, whether you sold them to yourself, for example, and like all the history and where it's going, and whether you printed or like minted another part of those NFTs. So that is something that is unique, because before, if you made prints and decided to sell them in a different town, it's likely that nobody will be able to catch this. So you can have this limited edition prints of 9 every other week in different town.
Right. Yeah.
But with NFTs, you can attach your wallet. Like, for example, on Twitter, my name is my last name, Tchebotarev.eth. So that's my wallet. You can actually look it up and say, what did I buy? How much money do I have in my wallet? This is something that very transparent, and nothing else other than blockchain can give you that amount of trust. You can basically, in a sense, look into my bank account and see all my transactions, and see who I transacted with, and see where this transaction have led, et cetera, et cetera. So this actually creates a trust in a trustless society. And now, as an artist, I can sell anywhere in the world. So you don't have to know me. You can just see that if you like my stuff, and you can actually go and investigate it a lot easier than, imagine going and buying from a Paris artist photograph somewhere bought on the street, and they might convince you that this is like a one-off, but you might guess that it's probably not, because they're in the business of selling it to tourists. Right. So NFTs actually help solve this problem once and for all.
You know what? As I was kind of going through the exercise of getting my brain around NFTs and what the possibilities are for the technology, one of the analogies, my brain works in analogies, right? So one of the analogies that I thought of was, and you tell me if this is flawed or not. So I was thinking, buying a used car, right? In the old days, buying a used car, you could, in the old days, it was like you had to trust the seller, right? And then the slightly less old days, there's Carfax and those sorts of things where you could see if the car had been in an accident or some kind of top line information about the car beyond mileage and just overall upkeep. With a smart contract or NFT, if I'm understanding this correctly, that means with using the used car analogy, I would have the whole history of that car, or at least the transactions associated with that car. So instead of John Doe telling me, hey, this new BMW that you're about to buy, I'm going to sell it to you for 20 grand. That's the best I can do. Meanwhile, maybe he sold it for whatever price before that. So with an NFT or a smart contract, I'd be able to see, oh, well, you sold it, or you purchased this car 2 years ago for $5,000, right? So I would have that transparency into it. Is that a fair way to look at the technology?
Yes, you can see everything that happened with a particular NFT. So you can see the whole transaction history, who created this, who sold it, for how much, where it's going. If it's a split transaction where it might go to several owners, you will be able to see that as well. So that is all available and immutable, so it's impossible to change it. But the analogy is that it's not Carfax, it's not an individual company. This record is on millions of computers. Whoever participates in downloading and using Ethereum blockchain, and there's currently about 1 million computers, I think, everybody has a full copy of all transactions. So your Carfax is with 1 million people, and everybody can verify and say, yes, that's true information, and it's never been altered before.
Wow. See, that and that's powerful. And that's across, like we were talking about in a panel discussion we were on recently at the Visual Storytellers Conference. The implications of this are far beyond just creative things, right? Because you could have a smart contract that's associated with your degree from your college, so someone could know 100% where you went to school at and not have to call the admissions office or anything. It's just like, oh, there you go, right there. So all this information is there, right? What other applications do you see for just the whole smart contract piece of it?
Right. So I think the good way to think about smart contract, it's an app. So it has developers that design this. So the app can have bugs in it. And there's actually companies that are trying to verify and make sure that the contract, it has less bugs or no bugs. And that's a very important aspect as well, because if you have a buggy or flawed app or a smart contract, then your NFT or your asset might be stolen. And again, that's the same as with a real contract. So for example, if you're buying or selling a house, but the signature that you're putting and you didn't read the details, well, it might be your loss, right? So you might be actually at a very bad situation. And so smart contracts act pretty much the same, but because they are an app, because they can be programmed, you can think of anything. There is a lot of interesting innovation in financial space. Like, for example, you can have a hedge contract depending on whether the price of oil goes up or down. You might have a smart contract or an NFT in that case that will actually execute specific transaction and will pay you money if you were right, for example, and somebody else who gave you that contract was wrong. So this way you can start operating without the need for a bank, without the need for centralized exchange. And that's why they're called decentralized exchanges. So you're basically dealing with people directly without any intermediary in that transaction. And you can see the whole spread of applications that happen through this. Anything to do with buying or selling assets, anything to do with buying or selling art, anything to do with insurance or loans. There's a big movement called DeFi, decentralized finance, where you can loan money directly to people on the other side of the planet. Like I can go and loan $100 to somebody in Indonesia and earn a percentage interest on this. And it's impossible to do it otherwise. Like if I don't know those people in Indonesia, there's no way I can loan them. But if I want to take on the risk and I want to give them loan in more in countries with higher risk profile, for example, I can do that. That's my choice. But a lot of governments actually restrict that and don't allow investors to even participate in that.
Wow. Wow. And see what you're describing, it sounds like, well, you, first of all, you've alienated half the audience when you talk about, okay, it's like writing code, right? So because I think that gap or the valley that people have to jump over is, hey, I'm an artist. I want to create stuff. I want to make cool stuff. Yes, I want the benefit of being able to do limited editions, but I don't want to work for it. I don't want to have to write code. I want to have to like do all this other magic and all this stuff. I just want to be able to make it happen, right? So how do you get from
Absolutely.
just a photographer to, hey, I have a limited edition of prints that are available? How do you do that without programming?
Well, most photographers don't make their own cameras, and they don't make their own SD cards, and they don't make their own photo editing software, even though some do. But most rely on other tools that have been built. Most don't, make their own canvas, for example, because I don't even know how you make canvas, but they rely on tools that are available for them. So they participate in the marketplace or an economy where those tools have been created for them. And so there's currently a lot of movement to create those tools. One of them is a company that I'm starting right now that will make it accessible to photographers to make all kind of limited edition prints in the digital landscape of NFTs. There's platforms that actually allow you to make NFT without actually putting that on the marketplace. So you can own it and you can decide where and when to list this. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of interesting innovations, but you don't have to code to get the benefit out of this. The extra benefit comes from when there's a lot of coders, a lot of smart people who are building those tools so that community can participate and find their own collector or their own buyer.
See, and that's what I need, right? I mean, that's a good analogy. I didn't make anything that I'm using here, right? I didn't make my microphone. I didn't make the camera. I didn't make the software we're using, but I'm enjoying the benefits of it. So yeah, I want that world, but applied to NFT. So as much as you can reveal, you mentioned just now that you're working on something, the whole software company that you're building, because you're a software entrepreneurial addict, right? You have to be building. Ev has to be building companies. So tell us about that. What, as much as you can tell us, what are you building?
Right. Well, first of all, many years ago, I built a company that I still proudly share. Wear the hoodie. But what's happening is that when we were building for NPX, the overall assumption that it was Web 2.0, that was the time when giving you likes, giving you followers or exposure was the way to go. And we were trading in exposure. But as all these memes you probably have seen, exposure doesn't pay your bills.
Right.
So you cannot take exposure to the bar and have a margarita, for example.
No.
So in the assumptions that we were building, we're kind of like limited in what the internet was back in the day. And that was about, let's get as much eyeballs as possible to the page and let photographers figure out what to do next. And I think that it was an approach that was possible at the time, but currently we can see that it's a flawed approach. And what's happening with what's called Web3 or decentralized web is that we're able to make direct connections between collectors or fans and photographers. So if you think of this, if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, you still need to monetize them somehow. It's not going to bring you cash. It's not going to pay your bills. So you either have to go and make sponsored posts or ads, or you have to find super fans that will buy your stuff that you're promoting, or something in between. And we think there is a better way where you just have a direct connection with some of your fans. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 100. That's where the platforms like OnlyFans and Patreon has been very successful in bridging this gap. But for artists, it is something where the collector can also participate in the growth of the artist. So imagine if you like or love someone's work And the more you buy, the more you collect, the more value you can unlock through this. So with NFTs, what's possible, you can say, if you collected more than 3 pieces from this artist, we're going to give you an access to a limited collection that's only available to those who are true fans. And those true fans might be part of the online events or gatherings or Zoom calls or in-person events that is unlockable if you're a true collector. And that's where there's a great analogy with Ferrari. So if you have tons of money and you want to go and buy a Ferrari, they will not sell you a Ferrari. Because really? Ferrari can choose who to sell Ferraris to. And they first sell Ferraris to people who have a relationship with the brand. So the best way to have to buy a new Ferrari is to first buy a couple of used Ferraris and start going to the events that Ferrari is hosting, and then develop a relationship, and then they will allow to sell you the new Ferrari. So you can see how the power of brand is very different from buying Toyota Camry, for example. Nobody's going to ask you to have Toyota Camry, the previous one, to buy the current one. But some of the well-established brands and some of them that have clout, they want to have true fans. And that's the same thing that will happen with the best artists. If you want to participate in the growth of them as an artist and in the growth of this, what's currently called creators economy, then NFTs allow you programmatically filter out people who are true fans, who have been with you in the beginning and who believed in you when nobody else did.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the tool that you're building or the service is going to facilitate that. And like I said, in that whole analogy of, I'm a photographer and I don't want to program. This is where you guys come in as the connective tissue to make that happen.
Exactly.
And is it just like, are you targeting specifically influencers, or can it be Joe Blow, anybody, Frederick Johnson, whatever, right? Do I have to have a gazillion followers?
One of the key missions for the company is to help educate and help it make as easy as possible to participate in this, because as it stands today, and as we discussed, like everybody needs to really jump in and explore and understand how it works. But even for technical people, it might be really hard. You might have like a surface understanding of like, oh, well, NFTs is this or blockchain is that, but actually having a deep understanding is a bit hard, and using the tools that exist today with creating wallets, buying Ethereum, figuring out what the gas fees and all of this is actually pretty complex. So one of the missions is to make it as simple as possible, as user-friendly as possible, so that people who have great art, great works, but they may not be tech savvy, they shouldn't be excluded from participation just because they cannot write code, or they shouldn't be able to, they shouldn't the requirement shouldn't be that they write code in order to participate in a new wave of creator economy.
So then what are we looking at price wise? I know you're still early stage now, so it might be too early to ask that question. But what does that look like? In other words, what's the business model?
So first of all, frankly, it's a bit too early to think about a business model.
Yeah.
I think the key is to build value for photographers and value for collectors alike. So that's where kind of like the main principle will lie, to make sure that photographers have this connection and have ability to build those networks. We're thinking in terms of collectives. So a lot of photographers, they have friends, or they have, like portrait photographers work together, or some landscape photographers work together. So they will be able to form collectives and actually benefit from being a part of the collective, because part of the fee of their sales can go back to the collective. So we want to help artists who are in the middle of working on some big projects. They will be able to sustain themselves if they're a part of this collective. So if you can imagine a group of 7 artists, for example, that are traveling and working on different projects, they may not be like online all the time, or look at their minting or selling their photos or doing their marketing that's needed. They might be there building a big body of work that they will know will be amazing for the world, but it takes time. So those kind of collectives can actually help photographers by de-risking their finances and helping them get some money while they're working on this. So sort of like the universal income, universal basic income, helping people stay creative and helping each creator help in a small bit or a decent amount of bit to other creators as well. So that's the first big chunk of work. The second big chunk of work is that we need to add, and I'll be a bit technical, we need to add more liquidity to all the NFTs. A lot of times NFTs are either not sold or sold once. And I think that's where the value lies if we are able to build specific tools that encourage reselling and selling multiple both editions or like reselling NFTs more over and over again so that we know the real price. So imagine it's like, as you mentioned, like with stock markets and cryptocurrencies, they go up and down dramatically. That is often because the liquidity is pretty low. And so the swings are pretty high. By adding more liquidity, by adding specific tools that make it easier, more accessible, more user-friendly to trade those NFTs, maybe at a lower price points, so it's accessible to everyone who wants to support the artist or participate in success of this artist in the future, they'll be able to afford this.
See, and I want to end with this. So how far out do you think we are in terms of not your startup, but just the mainstream understanding and adoption of NFTs? Like, for example, not that this is a related technology, but QR codes, right? When QR codes first showed up, I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we see them. And then they started popping up everywhere. And then during the pandemic, they were on every menu, at least in the United States, right? You got to scan with your phone. And now they're relatively mainstream. How long but this has been years, right? Maybe a decade. So how long until NFTs get to that level of mainstream understanding? And, the second level of that is adoption.
That's a great question. I'm thinking of like iPhones, one of the successful hardware products. It's been on the market for 14 years. And I feel that only in the last 3 or 4 years that it's been really good where you don't really have to change it every year. In terms of the adoption of NFTs, I think it will be lumpy in a way that, big companies or governments will start adopting this in some ways. As you mentioned, like Carfax or like house sales. That I'm sure that in 3 years there will be big governments of a size of like European nations that will actually require all those sales to get onto the blockchain because that's a better way, it's a safer way, it's more transparent way, it's cheaper way as well. So surprisingly, there's all the benefits and there's none of the drawbacks. So in terms of NFTs, I think it's going to happen the same way. For the big art sales, most of them will probably be NFT enabled in the next 2 years, 3 years. I'm talking about like big sales, like auctions. So all of them will probably have a record on it. As an NFT that will provide proof that it's being purchased through this auction and can be sold through this auction as well, or like it can be sold through secondary markets after that. And for big photography sales as well. So anything of value will go first, like houses, cars, art, and eventually for anything smaller, as small as $100 or $200, it makes sense to basically transact and have a record as an NFT.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if people want to dive into this stuff and follow you and keep up with, the business that you're building right now, what's the best way for them to connect to you, currently today? If they want, in other words, if they want to be ready when Ev pulls the curtain off of this thing that you're working on, or just connect with you individually, what's the best way for them to link up?
Yeah, the best way is to sign up for our email list at sloika.xyz, sloika.xyz. and sign up for a newsletter. We will be updating everyone, and there's lots of ways to keep in touch with us and with the community that we will be growing. And that's really exciting. I think photographers deserve better. I think we can really make a big difference and create tools that are directly linking them to fans and directly changing lives of photographers like day in and day out.
Love it. All right, we'll leave it right there. Evgeny Tchebotarev, thanks, man. I appreciate your time. Always a pleasure chatting with you. I think the last time you and I spoke or did an interview, we were doing vodka shots or something like that. You remember that?
I remember that.
Oh, you got it. That's awesome. It's too early in the day, Ev. It's too early.
Yeah, this time is just ugly.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. Well, cool, man. We'll leave it right there. Thanks a lot, man. And best of luck with what you're building. I know it'll be successful because I know you as a person, and people can hear the passion in your voice as you discuss this new space that you're moving into. So I don't think there's an alternative or alternate reality that you're not successful with this next move. So congratulations. I'm looking forward to seeing it. This is TWiP. This episode was sponsored by MPB, the world's largest online platform for used photo and video kit. Visit mpb.com.